Last thing on the list, guys, we're going to talk about wind. And oh man, do I hate wind. I hate it. But it is the best attribute out there. Wind and current in general. Like I said, we're going to, throughout this series of schools, we're going to get in depth on these baits and species direct and everything. So don't let it fool you yet. Movement of water. Understanding what's happening, how to use it to your advantage. What fish do. You got two types of current. You got wind driven, blowing across the surface, and you've got basically natural in a river or controlled by a dam. This happened when Chad and I were up doing the smallmouth show. We went out and we fished 2 days. First day we went out and I spanked him. Second day I went out and I got killed. And what we were doing, and we'll talk about ethics, but when Chad and I fish, we're up in the bow of the boat. And we were working pylons like this. The first day we went in, I'd hit the front, he'd hit the back. Like so. And that way each guy gets a shot. Just the ethical way to do it. That day that I did well, we had wind-driven current across the surface. The second day they started to draw the lake down and we actually had true current moving. And the way it went is that the current comes down like this direction here. When you have wind, driven current, I don't care if it's a rock or a boulder or a point or whatever, they set up on top of it. The wind's coming this way, the fish set up on top, in the front of it. The wind was blowing in. I was casting my drop shot up into here getting fish. The wind was coming in, the fish were on the front side of it because it's only moving the surface. What it does is as the pylon's here and the water's here, as it comes in, any little surface creatures, and there happen to be some mayflies up there that have been hatching. The wind drives in, hits this guy, and it starts to mix. All that surface stuff in the surface film, all the small insects that are in there hatching out, they get mixing in right here. The bait fish come in, the smallmouth are underneath them. When we went back up, it was moving hard. I'd throw up in here, nothing was happening. Chad was coming in behind and he was getting a lot of fish, spanking me. Well, the whole column of water was moving top to bottom as they drew it out. When you have that kind of movement taking place, what do? They go behind because they're not going to sit there and battle. As it wraps around, if you're looking at it from an aerial above and the current's coming down like this, it starts to mix back here, right? Does the same thing. But they got to get back in behind it. So in a river, what you'll see, you have the current drawn down, you've got a point. If the river's going this way, like this, and this is a point right here, and you got the current coming, what happens? It does this little number, right? The drop shot DVD in the walleye section, remember we talked about this? What it does is it sets up this current break, and what I call, when I call slack bars, slack lines, you guys hear me talking about it, that's where this is coming around, and it's meeting this again. And you get this little turbulence going in here, and what that is this outside water is moving faster, and this inside water is actually, moving this way, and that's a mixing point right there, and it's slow. All that stuff gets trapped in there. They don't have to work as hard. They sit in there and pick that stuff off. A boulder, when we get to steelhead fishing, we'll talk about this. Guys just flail away all day long. Chad and I were down there. They said the fishing was slow. We got 10 fish. Not bragging, it's just simply knowing where to throw. You've got a boulder. Lots of them in the clear water. Current's coming through. Fish are coming up. Where do they want to rest? Behind the boulder, right? You got to manipulate your bobber to where it hits. That jig rolls around that rock and gets caught right into that seam, and what? Right in their face. Current is a huge advantage in the springtime, fall, I don't care when it is. Give you an example, we're down at Banks Lake early spring, went across to Barker Flats. Wind's blowing up the lake, which is kind of a southwest. Barker Flats is over here, boat ramp is over here. Wind's kind of blowing like this. Launch the boat. It's 49 degrees. Drive the boat over to here. It's 39 degrees. What it does is the sun heats the surface. The wind blows all that warm air against the shoreline. It hits the shoreline and it does what? It packs it in. So what you'll do in the springtime, and you guys know that in the spring, your south-facing shorelines are the warmest, right? Everybody knows that? The south-facing shorelines are the warmest. If you're in a lake like this and you got a bay, and you got a bay right here, and this is north, this is south. Man, I destroyed that pen. If this is north and this is south, okay? The sun is down here, right, in the spring? Not quite up yet. As the sun shoots rays in, what happens? This is all shaded in here. Go out to your lake this spring and watch it de-ice. These southern facing are always the warmest. They get more sun exposure. The warm winds come out of the south, pushes that warm water up into there. These are always the first places that you'll fish in the spring. Banks Lake is notorious. You can get out there early and find these little pockets. And they're just tiny little pockets. I mean, it's cool fishing. That lake, you know, it's big cliffs like this, and you'll find these little tiny pockets like this. And what happens, you'll get in these little pockets, and that water may be 5, 6, 7 degrees warmer. You'll catch nothing, nothing, nothing. You'll work up into here, and there's two things that are happening. One, it's facing the south, so it's getting more sun. And you can look over on the north side, there'll be pockets of snow still on the highway up high. These bays where the wind blows, the gravel will be broken up, and there'll be nice stuff about like this, and it'll be black. Black traps heat. You'll get in these little pockets, guys, you'll catch huge rainbow trout, you'll catch a bunch of smallmouth, and they're just little tiny areas. And you may have worked this shoreline for 200 yards going, there ain't nothing in here, until you get right to there, because that's where they're all at. You've got to use the wind to your advantage. People hate it, I hate it. It causes a lot of stress in my life. But it is a huge advantage. Mick and I went out, take him out pike fishing. Never been pike fishing before, always wanted to go. Went out to Coeur d'Alene Lake, fishing the cabbage beds. You got cabbage beds running like this in this bay, and you got them running like this, and they're all out in here like this, and it kind of makes a bowl like this. And the wind was blowing like crazy this way. I come back in like this with my boat, and we basically slid the boat, not even driving it side, just slid it to keep it nose into the wind. And you'd huck across the wind like this, and you'd bring the spinnerbaits this way. All those pike are nosed right under front of those. Reason being is that everybody says, well it's because the wind blows the bait in. Well, bait fish can swim in that. The bait fish aren't getting stuck. What happens is taking everything on the surface, all those floating insects in that surface film layer, pushing it up into there, it butts into these weeds, and even though they're weeds, they still will mix it. Those bait fish come cruising by, those pike, bass, all of them, they'll be just nosed right like this. Bam! That's why I was telling you I never cast into the wind. Can you see what would happen in this situation if I casted into the wind? How many fish am I going to come in contact with? Maybe this one? If I go this way, I keep my bait in the strike zone for a longer period of time. I come across the whole face of that, there may be 5 or 6 of them sitting in there. The only time that this casting into the wind, guys, will work is if you don't have a lot of weeds yet. Maybe you don't have a lot of stuff coming up. It's clear water. You got a lot of wind blowing in. I had this happen at Newman Lake one time. You got a lot of wind blowing in, and it was something that I read, and I thought I'd try it. And I didn't have any real targets to hit. So what I did is I started casting into the wind. It's one of the only times I've had luck. And the thought process was that in clear water, the fish are pointed into the wind, and if you throw in front of the fish and bring it back, they can watch it come to you. So I hadn't had anything happening. Once again, this is that thing of constantly wanting to figure out what's going on. I turned around, and the thought process was if you bring it, cast into the wind and bring it back, you come up their side. So you get a startle reaction strike. It's the only time I've had it happen. Anytime I'm fishing any kind of cover, I'm casting across it, I'm casting into it, bringing it in. I think that about does it, fellas. We got 9:30. Anybody have any quick questions? Bored out of your mind? Learn anything?
Very good.
What's that? I got a 101 pound Minn Kota. And I just put it on and just hold there. Yeah, oh yeah. That wind, guys, just a quick thing, when I did the drop shot DVD, you probably heard me talk about it. Any of the islands up there will fish, and they hold a lot of the fish that we catch. When that wind gets blowing, and everybody hates Priest in the summertime when we're up there because at 11 o'clock it starts blowing. It does it every day, 10 o'clock, whatever, right in that area.
24 years of experience.
It blows. What it does is it blows this way. Yep, no, north. It comes out of the south, blowing up towards the north. And it'll take and blow around. And you can get eddy lines that set up behind islands. The surface is mixing like this. And we'll catch those. You'll see it's all choppy right here, and then it's calm. I'll fish right on the edge of the chop and the calm. Because any mice and shrimp, anything that's kicking around there is getting mixed in. It's drawing in the pike minnow, which is what those guys are feeding on. A lot of guys, when it gets windy, they leave.
It's got to be shallow fishing, man.
Oh yeah, that's 30 feet. Yep, it's 30 feet. But that's once again the wind. I hate it. I hate the wind, but it's the Chinook show we did out at Coeur d'Alene, pulling planer boards. Started out that morning, the fishing was slow. There was a lot of boats out. There's probably 10 boats out there. We're trolling slow, got the boards out, nothing's happening. All of a sudden the wind starts blowing, boats start leaving, gets choppy, we start whacking the fish. Because it started to break the light up, which breaks down their tension level, makes them want to feed. It makes the boards work. You have to deal with it. It gets everything mixed up. You can never overpower a boat with your Minn Kota or your motor guide or whatever you're using. I got 101 pound on it, and I'll stand out there until I'm ready to, rip my head off because it's driving me nuts. But they will bite. Wind is major, very important. Okay?
When we talk about ideal wattage for fish finding?
Ideal wattage is going to depend on if you're running a split. If you look at the ones that you get that are just a straight 200, they'll be 2,400 watts. If you're going to run a split, you got to have 4,000 peak watts of power to split it. And when you go to buy one, it'll say if you can have that option. And if it doesn't have that option, if you look at your peak wattage, it'll be 2,400. It can't run to 50. It's got to be 4,000. The more watts you put out, the better the picture. Okay? Good to go, guys? All right. Everybody drive safe. Okay?